Can everyone hear me all right? Awesome. So, 6 years ago, I moved to France. And in the days leading up to this big move, my husband, who is French, he tried to give me a few tips to make me look a little more French whenever we got off the airplane. You can imagine what he told me. One of the tips that he gave me was all about signs. And he said, Robin, if you want to do something, and you look around and you don't see a single sign that says explicitly, do not do that thing that you want to do, then you can do it. Go for it. Don't be polite like you are in the US. Don't wait for permission. Basically, until something has been written down legally, until an official rule has been made, and until a sign has been posted, you don't have to change your behavior. This is exactly what's happening in the world of mobile apps when it comes to accessibility. We all know what it is. We all know that it's important, but most of us, we haven't done anything about it because there is nothing in Europe that legally says we need to make our apps accessible. Until today. Well, not really today, until June of 2025. For some of you, there is a rule coming that says you must finally make your apps accessible here in Europe before June of 2025. And that rule, to be aware of, is called the European Accessibility Act. Who has heard of the European Accessibility Act before today? Perfect. Okay, so this is new. In this lightning talk, we're just going to talk about the basics, so I'll get down to the nitty-gritty of what is this thing and what, if anything, should I be doing about it as a developer. First of all, what is it? It is a directive from the European Commission. Sorry, I'm sticking to the floor. Gonna stand just over here. So it is a directive from the European Commission. In this directive, it says you make products and services more accessible. For whom? For people in Europe who may be blind, who may be deaf, who may have cognitive impairment, you name it, the whole realm of accessibility for a diverse audience. And the products and services are all over the place. They range from ATMs to banking services to smartphones, which is why it is important to us. We haven't heard of it, but it has been coming for a really long time. It was first proposed in 2011. That is not a typo on the slides. We are 2024. We're hearing about it now because the implementation deadline is coming up. Before June of 2025, all of our apps should be in order if they need to be. Oh, okay, party fell. There it is. Okay, who is it for? So I said this is for some of you will have to do this. It is for everyone in Europe. Okay, we're all in Europe, check. But it targets the public sector. By this, I mean if you're making a mobile app for the post office, La Poste, or the military, maybe public transit, like the TBM application, or public education. And it also applies to private organizations that may be selling a service into the public sector that would end up being client-facing, so they still need the same rules. Just by a show of hands, is there anyone who thinks they might be working on an app that is in the public sector? Anything similar to this? No? Maybe? Okay. Is anyone unsure if theirs would be in the public sector or not? It's not always clear. Well, even if it doesn't apply to you today, even if it's just one person who may have to change their code ASAP before 2025, this is good to keep in mind because one day you may be working on the application for La Poste. One day you may be in a job interview and they ask you about the European Accessibility Act because for them it is required. So why should you care? The day when you work on one of these public sector applications, you should care because you can be fined, not you personally, but your company. In France, that means up to 20,000 euro per service that is not in compliance. That is a very scary number. And additionally, you can have legal penalties that are defined in the French law if you don't fix the problems that are identified by certain dates. Now, you may be motivated or scared at this point and want to run out and start reading the European Accessibility Act tomorrow. The European Accessibility Act is just the first layer. It says very generally make these products and services accessible, but it doesn't really tell you how. To tell you how, it points to another document called the EN 301549. Aren't you glad you aren't lawyers? Which gets into more specifics of the how for general technology. This document gets even more specific by pointing to another document called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. This one you should have probably come across before. Has anyone heard of this one? Nice. Okay, cool. I'm glad. This means I'm teaching you guys something. But yeah, so it points to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. This gets into the nitty-gritty how for websites and for mobile applications. And for each member state in the European Union, they had to create kind of a glue law, tying all of this together, making everything legal and enforceable. The penalties are clear for each of the countries. So there is a French law that points to the EN 301549. But the main thing, if you only looked at one thing after this talk today, is to look at the last one at the bottom, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. This is the most important for us as developers because it really talks about the how. We don't need all of the extra information around it. It gives us what we need to change our code. So these Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, often it is pronounced WCAG, a very lovely acronym, but if I say WCAG, this is what I'm talking about. It is a standard for how to make your websites accessible. But over the years, it has evolved to apply for mobile applications as well. But you'll see when you dig into it, there's some things that we don't have to do because it doesn't work with our techno. It doesn't work on native mobile. It's basically one long list of rules, and they call their rules success criteria. And each of these criteria have different levels. The easiest ones are level A. To be more accessible, you can go up to level AA. And to be super accessible, you can go up to AAA. It is also a living document, which means from time to time, they will add new rules. They will remove some rules that they don't need. We are currently on version 2.1. This is the reference in the European Accessibility Act, but it is planned to point to version 2.2, June of next year. So I put little stars on here. If you remember, for the European Accessibility Act, you'll be targeting levels A and AA. And I advise looking at version 2.2 because by the time you fix everything for 2.1, it will have changed. So it's already out. We can go check it out now. Okay, so what exactly do you need to do? So if your boss comes to you and says, okay, we have to comply our application with the European Accessibility Act, when it all boils down to suspense, there we go, comply with the success criteria, so all of the rules in WCAG, version 2.2, because that'll be the newest, levels AA, which means that includes both A and the AA levels. So this would be your assignment as an engineer. To give you some concrete examples, it's not a tech talk if there is not code. Some of the rules, one of the rules will tell you to label everything. So this is the famous accessibility label that you may have come across in a few tutorials. You make sure every element on your screen has one, so it can be read by a screen reader, so it can be used by other assistive technology. Another rule, you're gonna have to go over your designs and make sure you meet a certain level of color contrast so everything is easier to read. You'll also have to think about enlarging your touch targets for all of your controls to make sure that they're a certain minimum size so they're easy for someone with a motor deficiency to access as well. You'll have to support dynamic type on every screen. Don't be ashamed, who does not yet support dynamic type? UI kit people, yes. That will be a lot of work if you have to get in compliance with this. Something that could also be a lot of work, another rule says that you have to support both orientations everywhere. So remove that line of code that just so prettily blocks your application in portrait mode. You need portrait and landscape, potentially a different design for landscape. That could be a lot of work. And there are more. Those are just a few to show you some examples of what you would be asked to do to be in compliance. But you can check out the entire list when you Google the WCAG criteria level A and AA. But this is a lightning talk, so I just wanted to leave you with a little taste, a little idea of what this is in case you need to know. So as a recap, European Accessibility Act will be enforced in June of 2025. So you have a little over a year if you need to do this. After that, you risk fines and penalties. If you are in the public sector, this certainly applies to you. If you are unsure, maybe go ask your legal team while you still have a comfortable year before you have to do all these changes, so it's not last minute. And to get a scope of the legal landscape, so we have the European Accessibility Act, points to EN 301549, which points to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. All three of those documents are important. And finally, it all boils down to WCAG version 2.2 level AA. Thank you so much for your attention, and are there any questions?